Hello, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, one God. Amen. Illumine our hearts, O Lord Jesus Christ, our God, with the pure light of thy divine knowledge. Implant in us also the fear of thy blessed commandments, trampling down all carnal desires, who may enter spiritual manner of living, both thinking and doing such things well pleasing unto thee. For thou art the illumination of our souls and bodies, O Christ our God, and unto thee we ascribe glory together with thine originate Father, and thine all holy good life, King Spirit, now and ever, and unto ages of ages. Amen. All right, so today we're going to talk about Saint Raphael, the Bishop of Brooklyn. It was not easy finding this icon, but I did find it. I didn't get a size that I like. That's why it's kind of fuzzy. But it's one of those icons that tells his life. I think those are just so interesting. So I actually have some detail about each one of the small little icons. And for you that are online, watching this online, we're going to run through and take a look at each thing. But as you see, we have, of course, the bishop is in the middle. You see Christ's hand coming down from heaven on the left upper part of the icon. That is not an indication of martyrdom in this case, although a lot of times it is. And he is wearing a crown, but this is just an indication that he is indeed a bishop. Now, his life was saturated with service to the church. So you could call him a martyr, not in the terms of someone who gave up their life for the church, but certainly someone who dedicated their life to the church with a tireless devotion. He was always on the go. And we'll learn a little bit about that as we look at this icon and then read some of the information that's available online about his life. Okay, so I'm going to transition now to a different screen for those of you that are online. Okay, so if you look at the icon, as mentioned at the top left corner of the icon, there is a baby being baptized. That would happen to be Saint Raphael. Saint Raphael was born and baptized in Beirut, Lebanon in 1860. His pious Orthodox parents had been forced to flee Damascus due to persecution of Christians there, during which their parish priest and others were martyred. I don't know if you're aware of Saint Joseph of Damascus, but that would be the parish priest that they are referring to there. The life of Saint Joseph is also very interesting. We won't cover it much here, but we'll say that he was very much beloved by his community. This was during a time of a Druze attack of Damascus, and they basically burned his church with people inside it. He was not there himself, but he was going from rooftop to rooftop, giving communion to the sick and the shut-ins. And when he realized that he was not going to escape, St. Joseph consumed the rest of the communion that was in his communion kit, and then they tied him to the back of a chariot and they dragged him to the town until there was nothing left of him. A very horrible way to die. So that's St. Joseph. Now this is St. Raphael that we are speaking of. And St. Raphael and his family fled Damascus, wound up in Beirut, where things were much more calm. Okay. All right, so continuing on. That's hard to see. Oh, I want to do a slideshow, that's why. Marilyn, can you see a larger picture now?
No, I just see a small one.
Okay, that's not going to work then. Hold on. We'll just make it bigger every time I go. There he is. See how big he is now?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, on March 28th, 1879, so that's 19 years later, St. Raphael was tonsured a monk by Patriarch Theos of Antioch and appointed to serve as his cell attendant. Okay. So that's what you're seeing here, Marilyn. I don't know if you knew, but there's an icon I'll show you at the end that is like the icon we had last week for St. George, where there's a big icon in the middle and then a bunch of little icons sort of making a frame. Okay. So we're going through those little icons that are there so that we can sort of take a look at the different details that are there. Each one sort of gives an account of what's going on in his life.
Okay.
So this is number 3. He was later sent to study at the renowned theological school in Halki Island near Constantinople and was ordained to the diaconate in the school's chapel on December 8th of 1885. Okay, so there he is, a young deacon. And that's Halki in the back. Okay. Saint Raphael yearned for more learning and went to study at the Kiev Theological Academy, where in 1889 he was ordained to the priesthood by Bishop Sylvester, rector of the academy, at the request of Patriarch Gerasimos of Antioch. So there he is, a priest. Look at that. But he looks like a monk priest because he's got the scoofy on his head. Indeed, he is a monk priest. Okay. And then Patriarch Gerasimos appointed St. Raphael to serve as the head of the representation of the Antiochian Patriarchate in Moscow from 1889 to 1895. Okay. In November of 1895, St. Raphael arrived in America and quickly established St. Nicholas Church in Brooklyn. In his missionary work, he founded numerous parishes and supervised the construction of several churches for Orthodox Arabs throughout North America. Look at that. Bishop is a bricklayer. How about that? He's not a bishop yet, I guess. Not quite yet. Okay. Oops, come back. There we go. St. Raphael established and edited a church periodical for Orthodox Arabs and was involved in other educational publication and literary activities throughout his life. So there you see him writing as if he were St. Luke or somebody. Now, here's an interesting thing. If you still get this through the mail, the Orthodox word is the very thing that he established. Okay, I think it was called Al-Kalimat, Al-Kalimat, which means the word in Arabic. So he is the founder of that publication that continues to be printed in, to this day. Okay. So that's continuing on. Okay. In October of 1902, St. Tikhon, enlightener of North America, consecrated St. Nicholas Church in Brooklyn, and that was established through the efforts of St. Raphael. So that's St. Tikhon in the gold, and that's St. Raphael in the blue, and then the church in the background is a representation of St. Nicholas in Brooklyn, New York. Pretty cool, huh? It's kind of fun to have all this is stuff that we can sort of see today in this day and age. Pretty awesome. Look at that. Okay. In July 1905, St. Raphael, whoops, not that. In February 1904, St. Raphael is consecrated as Bishop of Brooklyn by St. Tikhon and Bishop Innocent Putniski at St. Nicholas Church in Brooklyn. This is the first consecration of an Orthodox bishop to take place in America. Okay. It looks very bishopy there. In July of 1905, St. Raphael consecrated the grounds of St. Tikhon's Monastery in Pennsylvania. All right. This is a cool one. Saint Raphael traveled tirelessly to minister to his flock throughout North America, and through his pastoral labors, many discords among the Orthodox Arabs were pacified. You know, there's Orthodox Arabs, they like to
That wasn't
argue.
easy.
Wasn't easy. Okay. On February 27th, 1915, St. Raphael reposed in the Lord, and after his funeral at St. Nicholas Church in Brooklyn, he was buried in New York City. In 1989, the incorrupt relics of St. Raphael were uncovered and transferred to the Antiochian village in Ligonier, Pennsylvania. So let's see. That's,
Doesn't look like any of them.
I'm wondering, one of those has to be Metropolitan Philip in there somewhere. But
Well, the
no,
only other one would be the
it's probably,
second one from the left from the bottom. Those are the two bishops you said were.
no, there's
Maybe.
well, there's the one icon that's sitting where Raphael is sitting, the icon of Raphael is sitting on top of the casket. That's the second.
Well, that's the second one from
Yeah,
from the bottom.
those two there would be bishops that were responsible for moving him. I'm not sure who that is, to tell you the truth. I think it's kind of
Maybe the
stylized,
next one.
but that's Antiochian Village in the background there, even though that's not really Antiochian Village. You know, iconography. Okay, so, and here's the last of them all. In March of 2000, the Holy Synod of the Orthodox Church in America formally proclaimed Raphael a saint. Solemn glorification services took place on May 28th through 29 in 2000 at St. Tikhon's Monastery. Now there, on the left-hand side, you have an Orthodox bishop of the OCA. On the right-hand side, allegedly, you have our Bishop Basil and our Bishop Dimitri. Now they don't look like them, but they're the two bishops of Antioch because they're the ones who helped compose the life of St. Raphael that was used to determine his sanctity. Okay, so those, if you, even today, if you go and buy the book about the canonization of St. Raphael, it's authored by those two and two other priests that helped to put everything together for them. So that's the icon. And you know, going back, it's hard to do this on this screen, sorry. Going back to this particular one before that, you notice the icon, well, no, he's got a halo there too. So that's, I guess that's when they're determining that his relics are incorrupt. So there we have it. Okay, so that is, in a nutshell, that is the life of St. Raphael. So just to kind of recap, St. Raphael was born in Damascus. His family fled persecution, went to Beirut, where he was growing up in the church. He became a favorite of the local patriarch, and that patriarch had designs on him to do specific things for him, including spending time in Russia as his, someone who was keeping tabs on things that were going on, like an attaché, if you will. He didn't really like that position, and we're going to see a little bit about that as we continue on with his biography. So once he got to Russia, he did a little bit more study and then was blessed to go across the pond to the United States and begin his mission work there. And if you look around this area in Western Pennsylvania, there are quite a number of churches that were founded by St. Raphael in this area. Monessen of blessed memory is one of them. Pittsburgh, of course, but Pittsburgh actually was two churches that were founded by him, and then they merged into one. And so the merger happened, I guess, in the 40s or 50s. So you can't really say he founded that particular space. But let's see, what other churches did he do in this area? New Kensington, I believe Altoona also. And then Wilkes-Barre and churches like that on the other side of the state are part of his good work. Now, I am sure in this area we knew of him. I don't know if he ever spent any time in Newcastle. There's no way to get clear idea that he did. But it would not surprise me if he was here for a little while. And considering that the church at least has some connection,
Well, that would have been early teens, late 1910,
yeah,
11, 12. He died 15, so.
right. St. Raphael died in 15. This church
Yeah,
was
you
founded
wouldn't
in, well, I mean, part of it anyway. The history goes that the church was founded in 13. So he may have been aware of it, but in all likelihood, he didn't
He got lost.
come here. But you are a major rail stop for both the Pensy and the B&O lines. So I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if he showed up at some point. But anyway, so there we are. And he went all throughout the United States doing this kind of thing. So what we're going to do is just leave this icon up, and then I'm going to read from what we got from the OCA, and we'll talk about that. And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to interrupt me anytime you want. Okay, so our Holy Father Raphael was born in Syria in 1860 to pious Orthodox parents, Michael Hawawini, and his second wife, Miriam, the daughter of a priest of Damascus. The exact date of Raphael's birth is not known. That happened a lot, but he is estimated to be somewhere near his name day, which is the synaxis of the holy angels, Michael and Gabriel, and all the bodiless powers of heaven, which is on November 8th. Due to the violent persecution of Christians, at which time their parish priest, St. Joseph of Damascus, whose memory is celebrated on July 10th, and his companions were martyred. The Hawawini family was forced to flee to Beirut for their safety. It was here that the future saint first saw the light of day, not in the city of his parents. Indeed, as the child's life unfolded, it was evident that he would have no continuing city in this world, but would seek the city which is to come. That sounds like glorification language right there. So that's Hebrews 13:14. On the Feast of Theophany in 1861, he was baptized with the name Rafla, and later that spring, the family was able to return to Damascus. The child attended elementary school, where he did very well, but in 1874, it appeared that Michael Hawawini would no longer be able to afford his son's tuition. Fortunately, help came from the deacon Athanasius Attala, later Metropolitan of Homs, who recommended to the Patriarch Erotheos of Antioch that Rafla be accepted as a student of the Patriarchate in preparation for the priesthood. He was such a good student that he was selected to be a substitute teacher in 1877. The following year, he was appointed as a teacher of Arabic and Turkish. In March 28, 1879, he was tonsured as a monk by Patriarch Erotheos and served as his Beatitude's personal assistant. Okay, so at this point, he's about 17 years old. Well, yeah, 1877, he was 17, was the teaching assistant, and then 1879 when he was tonsured. All right. Since the Bellarmine Seminary had been closed in 1840, Patriarch Joachim III of Constantinople invited the Patriarch of Antioch to send at least one deserving student to study on a scholarship at the School of Theology in Helki, and St. Raphael was the one who was selected to go. On December 8th, 1885, he was ordained to the diaconate at the school chapel. In July of 1886, the young deacon received his certificate of theology and returned to his homeland in the hope of serving the church there. Patriarch Gerasimos of Antioch was so impressed with Deacon Raphael and often took him along on his pastoral visitations for his parishes. When his beatitude could not be present, Deacon Raphael was asked to preach the word of God to the people. Deacon Raphael was not satisfied with the extent of his knowledge and thirsted to learn even more. This did not stem from personal pride or ambition, but came from his fervent desire to benefit others. Truly, the words of King Solomon could be applied to St. Raphael. Give an opportunity to a wise man, and he will be wiser. Instruct a just man, and he will receive more instruction. That's Proverbs 9, verse 9. Therefore, he asked Patriarch Gerasimos to permit him to do graduate studies at a school in Russia, promising to return and to serve as the Patriarch's Russian language secretary. The Patriarch gave his blessing, and Deacon Raphael was accepted as a student at the Theological Academy of Kiev. In 1889, Patriarch Gerasimos ordered the young deacon to take over as the head of the Antiochian Representation Church in Moscow. We have one to this day, by the way. He was ordained to the holy priesthood by Bishop Sylvester, the rector of the academy, at the request of Patriarch Gerasimos. A month later, he was raised to the rank of archimandrite by Metropolitan Joannicki of Moscow and was confirmed as the head of the Antiochian Representation Church. After 2 years, Archimandrite Raphael was able to reduce the representation's 65,000 ruble debt by 15,000 rubles. He also arranged for 24 Syrian students to come to Russia to further their education, hoping that they would return to Syria and teach others. When Patriarch Gerasimos resigned in order to accept the see of Jerusalem, Archimandrite Raphael regarded this as an opportunity to free the Church of Antioch from its domination by foreign hierarchs. Burning with love for the Church of Antioch and wishing to restore the administration of the church to its own native clergy and people, Archimandrite Raphael began a campaign of writing letters to some Antiochian bishops and influential laymen. He also wrote articles in the Russian press, drawing attention to the plight of Antioch. His courageous efforts did not meet with success, however, and there was a price to pay for his outspoken criticism. In November of 1891, Metropolitan Spiridon, a Greek Cypriot, was elected as Patriarch of Antioch. Many Arabs believed that he had purchased the election by distributing 10,000 lira to several notable people in Damascus. Archimandrite Raphael refused to commemorate the new patriarch during services at the Representation Church. As a result, he was suspended from his priestly functions by Patriarch Spiridon, and St. Raphael accepted his suspension but continued to write articles in Russian newspapers in defense of the Antiochian cause. The patriarchs of Antioch, Constantinople, Alexandria, and Jerusalem successfully petitioned the Tsar to forbid Russian newspapers from publishing his articles. With this door closed to him, St. Raphael began to publish his writings in book form. Eventually, Patriarch Spiridon wrote to the assistant over procurator of Russia, a friend of St. Raphael's, asking him to persuade Father Raphael to ask for the patriarch's forgiveness. He did so, and the suspension was lifted. St. Raphael was allowed to transfer from the jurisdiction of Antioch to the Church of Russia and to remain there. He went to Kazan, taking a position as instructor in Arabic studies at the Theological Academy. He remained there until 1895, when he was invited by the Syrian Orthodox Benevolent Society of New York to come to that city and to be the pastor of the Arab Orthodox community. When the Holy Apostle Paul had a vision of a man entreating him to come to Macedonia to help them, Acts 16:10, he set off on a great missionary journey. When St. Raphael heard of his need of his countrymen who were scattered in a strange land, he crossed the ocean to labor in yet another foreign country. Archimandrite Raphael arrived in New York in November 2nd of 1895 and was welcomed by a delegation of Arab Christians who were awaiting their leader from Russia. On November 5th, his first Sunday in America, he assisted Bishop Nicholas in serving the Divine Liturgy at the Russian Church in New York City. Less than 2 weeks after his arrival, Archimandrite Raphael found a suitable place in Lower Manhattan to set up a chapel and furnished it with ecclesiastical items that he had brought with him from Russia. Bishop Nicholas blessed this new chapel, which was dedicated to St. Nicholas of Myra. This zealous pastor remained in New York teaching, preaching, and celebrating the divine services for his parishioners. It was not long, however, before he heard of smaller communities of Arab Christians scattered throughout the length and breadth of North America. Since these Arab immigrants had no pastor to care for them, it was not surprising that some should turn to other Christian traditions or to completely neglect their religious duties. This was an ongoing concern for St. Raphael throughout the course of his ministry. Although he was not opposed to dialogue with non-Orthodox Christians, nor to friendly relations based on shared faiths, beliefs, St. Raphael never lost sight of the clear line of distinction that exists between the Orthodox and the heterodox. He always insisted that any church unity must be based on the teachings of the 7 ecumenical councils. The orthodoxy of St. Raphael's life and teaching was demonstrated over and over again by his words and actions. He always upheld and defended the spotless faith, which was, quote, delivered to the saints, unquote, Jude 3. Although at first he did not understand the teachings of the heterodox, he later discovered how far removed they were from Orthodox doctrine. When he realized this, he took steps to protect his flock from harmful influences. He directed his people not to attend heterodox services lest they become confused by diverse and strange doctrines. See Hebrews 13:9. He believed it would be preferable for the head of a household to read the hours at home from the service book when it was not possible to attend an Orthodox church. That's a slight gloss, by the way. Originally, when he came here, he said that the services found in the Episcopal Book of Common Prayer, at least the older versions of them, would be acceptable for Christian worship. Now, as is indicated here, though, over time, it became abundantly clear that that wasn't always the case and that they didn't practice what was in the book. And so he, at that time, backtracked and said, it's better for people to have home services than to go to these churches and be confused. Okay. All right, so continuing on. In the summer of 1869, St. Raphael undertook 1896, excuse my dyslexia. St. Raphael undertook the first of several pastoral journeys across the continent. He visited 30 cities between New York and San Francisco, seeking out the master's lost sheep in cities, towns, and isolated farms. He fed the spiritually hungry people with the word of God in each place where he stopped. He performed marriages, baptisms, heard confessions, and celebrated the divine liturgy in the homes of the faithful where there was no church building. In other words, he zealously fulfilled his ministry as a preacher of the gospel, enduring many hardships and afflictions, and he was watchful in all things concerning the care of his flock, 2 Timothy 4:5. In 1898, the blessing of Bishop Nicholas, St. Raphael produced his first book in the New World, an Arab language service book called The Book of True Consolation in the Divine Prayers. This book of liturgical services and prayers was very useful to priests in celebrating the divine services, and also to the people in their personal life. The English version, published by Archimandrite Seraphim Nasser, is still being used to this day. True story.
That's the 5-pounder?
And that's it.
Really?
Yes.
That old?
That old.
Wow.
Between May and November of 1898, St. Raphael set off on his second pastoral tour. During this trip, he became convinced of the need for Arabic-speaking priests to serve in the new churches that he had established. When he returned to New York, he made a report to Bishop Nicholas expressing these concerns. With Bishop Nicholas's blessing, St. Raphael was able to bring qualified priests from Syria. He also sought out educated laymen whom he could recommend for ordination. Both as an archimandrite and later as a bishop, St. Raphael would appoint pastors only after obtaining the blessing of the Russian hierarch who headed the American mission. True story. This was the normal state of affairs in America at the time. Archimandrite Raphael welcomed Bishop Tikhon when the latter replaced Bishop Nicholas as the ruling bishop in America. On December 15th, St. Tikhon came to serve liturgy at the Syrian Church of St. Nicholas. Raphael told his people that their new archpastor was one, quote, who has been sent here to tend to the flock of Christ, to Russians, Slavs, Syro-Arabs, and Greeks, which is scattered across the entire North American continent, unquote. At that time, of course, there was no parallel jurisdiction based on nationality. The church united those of diverse backgrounds under the omophorion of a Russian archbishop. This was the norm until the Russian Revolution disrupted church life in Russia and also in America. Okay. Any questions about anything?
Yes, is he one of the more recent saints that did work
Raphael?
in? Yes.
Yes, Raphael was canonized in 2000. He died in 1915. Okay, so
Okay.
that's, yeah, he is definitely a modern saint. I mean, not in our lifetimes,
We
but
don't have any others like after him? that did-
there are others in the
Yes.
world, sure. In America, not so much.
Yeah.
No. There's Alexis Toth, who is a contemporary of Raphael. And in fact, I think they were, I mean, I actually was at Alexis's canonization in, I think that was 94, 93, somewhere in there. And those two, I think, were canonized almost for the same reason. One is the enlightener of the Syro-Arabs, and the other is the enlightener of the Slavs.
Okay.
Toth helped bring,
A lot of churches.
yeah, Catholic churches that
Uniate
were, yeah, the Uniate churches into the Orthodox fold. Yeah, it's his is a controversial canonization, because the reason why he became so wildly popular is the Catholic bishops were really merciless towards the Eastern Rite churches in their diocese. They didn't understand it. They didn't want to understand it. So they forced their priests to marry. They really wanted them to eliminate the Eastern liturgy. Because you got to remember, most of these bishops are from places like Ireland or, England, somewhere in those lines. And so they don't really have an appreciation for Eastern European Christian worship. But anyway, so Alexis and Raphael are probably the most recent. There are others, like I said, and it wouldn't surprise me if someone like Elder Ephraim is quickly canonized. But that would be a canonization beyond the Antiochian Church. Also, John of Shanghai, Metropolitan John, who's buried in San Francisco, John Maximovich. There's a very strong devotion for him, even in our own archdiocese. And so some people see, and so that's, I can't remember when he died, but it was probably in the 60s or 70s that he died. He's a saint of the Russian church outside of Russia. Yeah. So we have a few. One of my favorite people who is now a saint is Saint Sophrony of Essex, England. He was just canonized last year, actually. He died in 1993. So there are newer saints, but are they American? Sophrony came to America, maybe, but he didn't live here. Yeah. So anyway.
I remember a quote attributed to Raphael, in which he said, "I am Arabic by birth, Greek by education, American by residence, Russian at heart." Then I was surprised, Slav in soul.
Huh.
What would he mean by that? Slav in soul. I can the other ones were pretty clear,
Uh-huh.
right? But Slav in soul, I didn't quite get that.
Well, I think part of it is what you're experiencing here, his relationship with Nicholas and then with Tikhon were like, brotherly,
But they were Russian, right?
Well, but I mean, that's the Slavic
That's the
mentality.
whole Slavic.
Well, Kiev at that point, would it be Russian or would it be
Ukraine.
Slavic?
Well, I don't know if it was called Ukraine.
No, but it's still Slavic. I mean,
Yeah,
it's not,
Slavic.
it's not Russian like Moscow is Russian or St.
Oh, okay.
Petersburg is Russian. Even though St. Petersburg is very Western in the way that its outlook. But I would say that that's just a way of tying them all in together. and he had all the other ones already taken. So I think that's where he went.
Yeah.
That's a cop out, I know, but that's kind of what I think, is that, he just wanted to make sure, because there is a difference between being Russian and being Slavic, um, you
No,
read
I don't know, but
well,
you know what I mean?
if you ever
I'm not-
sat with John Bakun when he was alive, you would know the difference between, yeah. Give me 1 second. I'm just looking something up. Okay, so this is the Troparion of Saint Raphael. Okay. Rejoice, O Father Raphael, adornment of the Holy Church, thou art a champion of the true faith, seeker of the lost, consolation of the oppressed, father to orphans, friend of the poor, peacemaker and good shepherd, joy of all the Orthodox, son of Antioch, boast of America, intercede with Christ God for us and for all who honor thee. So you see the Antioch and the America there anyway, not all of it, but it is very clear that in his life he is one of the most boundless in Orthodox. He starts in Syria, goes to Lebanon, winds up in near Constantinople during that time, which was still under Ottoman occupation at the time, but they had not yet shut down the monastery or the seminary, which is good. They still are trying to reopen that seminary, by the way. And Turkey keeps playing games. They keep saying yes, and then they say no, and then yes, and then no. So it goes on and on. And then he goes to Kiev, and then he becomes the attaché to the Russians, and then he moves from there to America. So he's all over the place. And he hasn't, if you think about it in today's day and age, you have, in America, you're either conservative or liberal, which are horrible distinctions. But in the Orthodox world, you're either Slavic or Byzantine, right? The Slavics would be the Russian style. The Byzantine would be our style, the Greek style. Okay. And that really has come to America and becomes a thing. This morning, I did the liturgy at the monastery, and I made a comment about how, because it was our Lord's comment about making sure that your foundation is a strong foundation on Him, in other words, solely on Christ and not on anything else. And so I said, I really wish as Antiochians that we would sing the second antiphon of the Slavic liturgy, which is, put not your trust in princes and sons of men in whom there is no salvation. When his breath departs, he returns to his earth. On that very day, his plans perish. I think that is brilliant. And I wish that we could do that here, because it would help us remember that our politicians do not save us, because as soon as their breath departs, they return to their earth, and on that very day, their plans perish. I think that's an important thing for us to remember. So there's your sermon for the day. Probably the most political I've ever been at the monastery, and I hope I'm forgiven for that, but who knows? Okay, so continuing on then. If you have any other questions, just give me a holler. I'll be happy to answer them if I can. Okay, so continuing on with the readings here. In March of 1899, St. Raphael received permission from Bishop Tikhon to start collecting funds for a cemetery and for building a new church to replace the chapel, which was located in an old building on a dirty street. In the spring, he left on another pastoral tour of 43 cities and towns. Traveling by land and sea and undeterred by the obstacles and difficulties before him, he spent 7 months in the northeastern, southern, midwestern regions of the United States. He ministered to Greeks and Russians as well as Arabs, performing weddings and baptisms, regularizing the weddings of Orthodox people who have been married by non-Orthodox clergy, and he chrismated some children who have been baptized by Catholic priests. In Johnstown, PA, another place that he founded, he reconciled those who were at personal enmity and threatened to divide the Arabic community. Although civil courts had been unable to make peace, St. Raphael restored calm and put an end to a bitter feud. While in Jerusalem, he received a telegram informing him that Metropolitan Meletios Dumani had been elected Patriarch of Antioch. With great joy, the saint told his people from afar, for the first time in 168 years, a native Arab had been chosen as the primate of the Antiochian church. How about that?
That's those Greeks again.
It is. It's those. Yes, we won't go there, but yes, it is. After the new patriarch had been installed, Archimandrite Raphael was proposed to succeed Meletios as Metropolitan of Latakia. The patriarch, however, stated that the Holy Synod could not elect Father Raphael because of his important work in America. In 1901, Metropolitan Gabriel of Beirut wrote to Archimandrite Raphael asking him to be his auxiliary bishop, but he declined, saying he did not want to leave his American flock. First, he wanted to build a permanent church and to acquire a parish cemetery. The latter goal was achieved in August of 1901 when Father Raphael purchased a section of the Mount Olivet Cemetery on Long Island. In December 1901, Archimandrite Raphael was elected as Bishop of Zahle. Patriarch Meletios sent a telegram congratulating him and asking him to return. Father Raphael thanked the patriarch, but again declined the higher office. He said that he wished to complete the project of building a temple for the Syrian community in New York. The following year, he bought an existing church on Pacific Street in Brooklyn and had it remodeled for Orthodox worship. Bishop Tikhon consecrated the church to the great joy of the faithful in attendance, and thus St. Raphael's second major project was completed. Since the number of parishes within the Diocese of North America was growing, Bishop Tikhon found it impossible to visit all of them. The diocese had to be reorganized in order to administer it more efficiently. Therefore, Bishop Tikhon submitted a plan to the Russian Holy Synod, which would transfer the see from San Francisco to New York because most of the parishes and individuals were concentrated in the East. Since various ethnic groups required special attention and pastoral leadership, Bishop Tikhon proposed that Archimandrite Raphael be made his second vicar bishop, and Bishop of Alaska would be his first. In 1903, the Holy Synod of Russia unanimously elected Archimandrite Raphael to be the Bishop of Brooklyn, while retaining him as head of the Syro-Arab Orthodox Mission in North America. The Holy Synod announced the election to Patriarch Meletios, who was pleased by their decision. Bishop Tikhon wrote to St. Raphael to inform him of his election, and Father Raphael sent him a letter of acceptance. Meanwhile, Father Innocent Peninsky was consecrated as Tikhon's first auxiliary bishop at St. Petersburg's Cathedral of Our Lady of Kazan. On the third Sunday of Lent in 1904, St. Raphael became the first Orthodox bishop to be consecrated on American soil. Bishop Tikhon and Bishop Innocent performed the service at St. Nicholas Cathedral in Brooklyn. The new bishop's vestments were a gift from Tsar Nicholas II. Following his consecration, Bishop Raphael continued his pastoral labors, ordaining priests and assigning them to parishes and helping Bishop Tikhon in the administration of the diocese. At the end of 1904, Bishop Raphael announced his intention to publish a magazine called Al Kalimat, or The Word, as the official publication of the Syro-Arab Mission. This would help to link the people and parishes of his diocese more closely together. Bishop Raphael knew that he could not visit all Orthodox Christians across North America in person, but through the ministry of the printed word, he could preach the word of salvation even to the people he would never meet. The content was to be spiritual, moral, and churchly, so that the magazine could reinforce people in their faith. The word would focus on 5 primary topics: dogmatic truths, ethical teaching, historical and contemporary ecclesiastical subjects, chronicle of baptisms and weddings, etc., and official pronouncements. The first issue was printed in January of 1905, and St. Raphael considered this milestone as one equal in importance to the acquisition of St. Nicholas Cathedral and the parish cemetery. In July of 1905, Bishop Raphael consecrated the grounds for St. Tikhon's monastery and blessed the orphanage at South Canaan, Pennsylvania, on the other side of the state. 3 days later, he presided at a conference of diocesan clergy at Old Forge, Pennsylvania, because Archbishop Tikhon was in San Francisco. Among the clergy in attendance were three who would also be numbered among the saints: Father Alexis Toth, Father Alexander Hotovitsky, and Father John Kochorov. The later two would die as martyrs in Russia. For the next 10 years, Bishop Raphael tended his growing flock. With the growth of his New York community, there came an increase in the number of children. He was concerned about their future. He wanted to establish an evening school to educate them in a Christian atmosphere, because the future of the church in this country depended on the instruction of the youth. Period. Children who did not speak Arabic were already going to non-Orthodox churches where Sunday school classes were conducted in English. Boy, doesn't that sound familiar? Bishop Raphael saw the absolute necessity for using English in worship and in education for the future progress of the Syro-Arab mission. Taking heed of St. Paul's words to pray in a language the people understood, see 1 Corinthians 14:15 through 19, St. Raphael recommended the use of the service book of the Holy Orthodox Catholic Apostolic Church, translated by Isabel Hapgood. That's the other red book. It's a lot meaner than the 5-pounder, in all of his parishes. In March of 1907, St. Tikhon returned to Russia and was replaced by Archbishop Platon. Once again, St. Raphael was considered for episcopal office in Syria, being nominated to succeed Patriarch Gregory as the Metropolitan of Tripoli in 1908. The Holy Synod of Antioch removed Bishop Raphael's name from the list of candidates, citing various canons which forbid a bishop from being transferred from one city to another. I'll gently point out we don't pay attention to that canon anymore. On the Sunday of Orthodoxy in 1911, Bishop Raphael was honored for his 15 years of pastoral ministry in America. Archbishop Platon presented him with a silver-covered icon of Christ and praised him for his work and his humility. Bishop Raphael could not understand why he should be honored merely for doing his duty. See Luke 17:10. He considered himself an unworthy servant, yet he did the perfect work that fell to him. See St. Ignatius of Antioch in his letter to the Ephesians. Towards the end of 1912, Bishop Raphael became ill while working in his office. Doctors diagnosed him with a heart ailment that eventually caused his death. After 2 weeks, he felt strong enough to celebrate the liturgy in his cathedral. In 1913 and 14, this missionary bishop continued to make pastoral visitations in various cities. In 1915, he again fell ill and spent 2 months at home, bearing his illness with patience. At 12:40 a.m. on February 14th, which would be the 27th of February on the old calendar, St. Raphael rested from his labors. They called him, but he did not answer. They shook him, but he was gone.
He was on 40s. Well, he was born at 60, and then I had been 50,
54?
54, 55.
Younger than me. From his youth, St. Raphael's greatest joy was to serve the church. When he came to America, he found his people scattered abroad. He called them to unity. He never neglected his flock, but traveled throughout America, Canada, and Mexico in search of them so that he might care for them. He kept them from straying into strange pastures. He protected them from spiritual harm. During the 20 years of faithful ministry, he nurtured them and helped them to grow. At the time of his death, the Syro-Arab mission had 30 parishes and 25,000 faithful. He was also a scholar and the author of several books. He wrote many, if not most, of the articles that appeared in the Word magazine. He served his own Arabic community, but also reached out to Greeks and Russians, speaking to them in their own language. He became fluent in English and encouraged its use in church services and in educational programs. St. Raphael came into contact with all sorts of people and was a gentle father to them. He regained their love and respect by first loving them, and also through his charming personality and excellent character. He was also kind and merciful to others, but was strict with himself. He accomplished many good things during his earthly life, and now he joins the holy angels in offering ceaseless prayer and praise to God. Through the prayers of Holy Bishop Raphael, may we also be made worthy of this heavenly kingdom. Amen. So just a couple of comments that he was very well known for, he was a train rider. I mean, that's basically how you got from coast to coast. But what he would do is he would wait for the train to stop, and he would get off the train in a city. He would go immediately and find a hotel room, and he would put his bags in the hotel room. And he would not use the bed. He would get up immediately and he would go out and he would find the Arab speaking people in town. He'd go to merchants and he'd go to restaurants and he'd go wherever he could go to find Arab speaking people. And then he would tell the leaders of that community to gather everyone together so that they can meet and talk. And so it was in that process that he did the baptisms and the marriages and served a divine liturgy and said memorial services for the ones who died, and helped to get them organized into a community that he could then visit on a more regular basis. Then he would go back to the hotel, he would collect his things and get back on the train and sleep from the time when the train left that city to the time that it reached the next city. And that was his life. So he
Wow.
never used the beds that he was given while he was in the hotels. He would always use the train as his place to sleep, and he would just put the stuff away and then go and find the people. So that happened from town to town to town. I mean, he helped to found a church in Kearney, Nebraska, and I mean all sorts of places throughout the United States, and some of the strangest places. I mean, you wouldn't think Nebraska would be a place where you'd have an Arab community, but you sure did. And so he met with them and he founded their community. And then he went to, California and any place in between here and there. So really a tireless servant of the church and of Christ. Just a really humbling kind of an example. Yeah.
I just find it fascinating that Antioch didn't really get involved at all.
No. Nope.
I just found that fascinating always.
Well, I think part of it was because they were kind of crippled,
Well, that's true.
I don't know what their
And it wasn't until probably after the Russian Revolution
right.
is when they started.
Yeah. Yeah. The Balamand has an iconostasis that was also a gift from Tsar Nicholas. Okay, because it took a long time for the monastery to reopen and for the seminary to reopen. And so when you go to the church, I think it's St. George at the Balamand, it's the wood is, I mean, you can tell it's Eastern European, it's Russian.
But that timing was interesting.
Beautiful. Yep.
You had the Russian Revolution.
Right.
And then you had World War One.
Right.
And the Ottomans lost their power.
Right.
So that makes sense there, come to think of it.
And then St. Raphael dies. I mean, think about all of that. You lose all of the cohesion.
A couple of years, yeah.
Yep, you lose all the cohesion. So to carry that on just a little bit, and some of this is probably more myth than reality, but even in a town like Newcastle, when St. Raphael was gone, where's your bishop? So there was a church for a time called the American Orthodox Church. And their bishop was in Montreal. And so we have baptized people in this church that were baptized by that bishop of Montreal. There was also Ofeish. I believe he was a metropolitan for a time, or an archbishop, but he got into some issues, and so that stopped. Victor Abu Asli is probably the first from Syria,
20s.
right? But he would be the one that was immediately sent by Antioch to come and minister to the people here. And to be honest, some welcomed him and others did not.
That's probably true.
And so by the time you get to Bashir and Sam David, you have the split between the Toledo
Bashir
diocese.
Was in the 30s.
Right?
Yeah, I mean he was here in 30.
Right.
3 or 34.
Right. And he lasted until 66.
That's a long time.
That is a long time. Well, Philip was from 66 to what, 15, right? It's a long time too. But in that time, there was a split in the in the Antiochian church because there were some that were more loyal to the Slavophile way of doing things, and there were some that were more towards the Antiochian way of doing things. So Sam David in the Church of Toledo is more on the Slavophile side, staying with their eyes towards Russia and then receiving their spiritual influence through there. And then, Bashir and Saliba were, on the Antiochian side, the Byzantine Syrian side. And then they merged sometime in the 70s. Yeah. And they rejoined, and that's where we are today. But that's why you have, if you go to a town like Wichita, Kansas, which again, I mean, why would you have so many churches in Wichita? You have at least two, and the one reason is because there's a Sam David, the Toledo Diocese Church, which would be St. Mary's in Wichita, and then you had the other one, St. George's, and that was the Antiochian one from Brooklyn. Yep.
What a mess. Wichita's.
Wichita has 3 churches now because they have a Western Rite church too.
Oh, they do.
Yep, and it is. I mean, the cathedral in Wichita is big enough they could spin off again and they'd be okay. The cathedral would be fine and they could start another church.
Those numbers, 30 parishes, 25,000. That's 800 plus per parish.
Yeah, it's a little.
The buildings wouldn't have fit. Those were name only.
Well, and some of them were in towns where they didn't have churches yet. So they're registered, but they haven't built their chapels or whatever. We have some 250 maybe churches now.
Yeah.
And our numbers, I don't know our numbers, to be honest with you, because I don't pay attention to that stuff.
That are accurate.
Yeah.
There is one Syrian church here. I think I told Albert it before in Levittown. I think it's
Yes.
St. John's. Maybe is it St. John's? I'm not sure.
Yes, I don't know I probably do know their priest now, but I knew the one before him was
Yeah.
Father Boulos, who was a nice man. He's still around. He just moved to a different church. But yeah, I'm familiar with, there's one in Levittown. There's one in Yonkers. We have a church there. We have Teaneck, New Jersey, which probably isn't even remotely close, but I'm just thinking of churches that are in that particular sphere.
Yeah.
2 churches in Brooklyn. Yeah. So Florida, New York, wherever that is. Probably nowhere close. Can't think of any. Oh, well, I mean, Little Falls and Patterson, places like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, we just need to keep growing people so we can build more churches.
Yeah.
So there we are. Okay. Do we have a saint we want to talk about next week?
St. Herman of Alaska.
Okay, we're going to do St. Herman of Alaska next week. And then after that, I'm going to indulge myself and ask that we do St. Sophrony. Okay, since he's a relatively new saint, and I have some things to say about him.
St. Sophrony.
So this week coming, we'll do St. Herman of Alaska, the patron saint of our educational wing back in the day, and talk about him because he has a great life also. We'll probably be able to find an icon of him that's a lot like the one we have up right now. So that'll be cool. We'll do him, and then
these are interesting. I like these with all the little.
Yeah, me too.
Around.
If I can find them, I'll use them for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, God bless you. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you.
A good night, and we'll see you next week.
Everybody.
Good night.
Night.
Good night.
Good night.